In this lesson, we understand how to convert fractions into decimals. We take the simplest of the fractions, such as 1 by 2. Okay. Now, we all know the meaning of 1 by 2. What it generally means is that if we have, let's say, a whole cake, let's say that is a whole cake. Okay. This whole cake is divided into two equal parts. Is to be divided into two equal parts, 1 by 2. So the denominator, the number 2, says that the whole has to be divided into two equal parts. So let's do that. So somewhere here is exactly, that's how we divide. So this is 1/2, this is another half. So this is 1/2 and this is another half. Okay? So let me actually write them on the other side. So this is 1/2 and this half is another half. Okay. Now, in decimals, one thing we always do is divide a whole always into 10 equal parts. So the fraction equivalent of a decimal ideally should have 10 in the denominator. And suppose we take one of these 10 parts. How do we show this? 1 out of 10 parts. So the whole cake is divided into 10 equal parts. Obviously, each part is a tiny part. And we just take 1 out of 10. How do we do that? The way we do it is what we learned in the earlier classes. I try to draw the same whole here, afresh. Okay. So the same whole cake. We knew that originally we divided into two equal halves. Now, however, we need to divide this cake this time, the same whole cake this time, into 10 equal parts. So what do we do? Here is 1/2, this is another half. So each half, if we divide into 5 equal parts, like this, I have to divide this into 5 equal parts. So what I do is I identify the center point, okay, and slightly to the left I draw a dotted line and then divide this into two halves. Okay, so I have two here. Similarly, on this side I draw another cut and another divider. Okay, now how many do we have? One part, the second part, the third part, the fourth part, the fifth part. Let's assume they are equal. Okay, and then each one would then be how much? This is what we remember. If we divide this half into 5 parts, the other half also needs to be divided into 5 parts. Okay, let me do that. So the other half we divide into 5 parts. So first, this is approximately half of this half. So slightly to the left, put a divider here and another divider here. So, and then I divide this and then I divide this. Okay, so remember this point up to here is exactly half. All these put together is 1/2. And if I take, this is the beginning of the cake, okay, I call that as 0. And this is the end of the cake, I call that as 1. Okay, somewhere here we have exactly half. Now, to the left of this point, I see one part, the second part, the third part, the fourth part, and the fifth part. All the 5 parts are, let's say, equal. And similarly, on this side, you have 5 more parts. So, this point, what does it represent? On one hand, it represents 1 by 2. On the other hand, from our idea of fractions, this point or this cut should represent exactly 5 out of how many? 10 parts. See? So this is the first part, this is the second part, this is the third part, this is the fourth part, and that's the fifth part. So all these 5 parts add up to just 5 by 10. From here to here up to this outline is 5 by 10. Okay. Now, this 5 by 10, how many 1 by 10s does it have? The first 1 by 10, the second 1 by 10, the third 1 by 10, and the fourth 1 by 10. So we know that 5 by 10 is exactly equal to 1 by 10 plus another 1 by 10 plus another 1 by 10 plus the fourth 1 by 10 and finally the fifth 1 by 10. Okay, now this 1 by 10 we all agree in decimal form to represent like this. You first put a dot, we call that point, and any number I write to the right of this dot represents the one on the top. So I write this as 0.1. See? I put a dot to indicate that this 1, the digit 1 that I write to the right of this dot indicates it is just one tiny part out of the 10 equal tiny parts which make up the whole units. You see, there are 10 tiny parts. From here to here you have 5, another 5, so 10 tiny parts add up to 1. Out of these 10 tiny parts, if I just took one of them, then that is 1 by 10. And another way to write this is 0.1. It has no whole units, so I might as well say it has no whole units. Okay, 0 plus it has one tiny part out of the it has only one tiny parts out of the 10 tiny parts that make up the whole. So 0 plus 0.1, we also write this as simply 0.1. Okay, so we don't need to write this plus. We don't usually write this plus. When I say 0.1, what we mean is 0 plus 0.1. And when I say 0.1, we mean 1 out of one tiny part out of a total of 10 tiny parts. Remember, in decimal system, one whole is always divided into 10 tiny parts. That's the basis. No more than 10 tiny parts, no less than 10 tiny parts. Now, 5 by 10 has 5 of these 1/10s. The first 1/10, the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth, total 5. So each one of these 1 by 10s is 0.1. So I have 0.1 here, plus another 0.1 here, plus another 0.1 here, plus another 0.1 here, plus another 0.1 here. Okay, so what we mean is this is one tiny part out of 10 tiny parts. This is another one tiny part out of 10 tiny parts. This is another one of the tiny parts of the 10 tiny parts. And this is another one tiny part out of the 10 tiny parts. And like this, another one tiny part out of 10 tiny parts that make up the whole. Now we have another way of writing the same thing. We all agree. So we put a dot first to make sure that whatever we are going to write after this dot are going to be just the tiny parts. Okay, so how many tiny parts have we taken? We have taken 5 tiny parts out of the total 10 tiny parts that make up the whole one. So 5 by 10 is same as, so the fraction 5 by 10 is same as 0.5. And we have already seen 5 by 10 is same as 1 by 2. So I can say the fraction 1 by 2, that is a whole divided into two tiny parts, equal tiny parts, and we just take, that is the whole divided into two equal tiny parts, we just take one of them, and that is 1 by 2, and that is actually same as, if the whole is divided into 10 tiny parts, so by 10 we write, we just take 5 of those tiny parts, and this we read as 5 tiny parts out of 10 tiny parts, which is exactly 1/2. And this is in the decimal form. We put a point, so you are going to write only the tiny parts after this, and 0.5. So what it means is the whole is divided into the the whole is divided into 10 tiny parts. We don't have any, and we have taken only 5 of those tiny parts, and they are not even 1/2, one whole. So another way to say this is it has no whole parts, but it has only 5 of the tiny parts which make up a whole. So this is also we write as 0.5. Okay, thank you.